We're going to look at the cultural history of the afterlife. And it's gone through a few changes. You know, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die, right? It's an old phrase immortalized in many a country and western song. And I think it demonstrates ambivalent attitudes towards heaven. It'll be fantastic, right? An elderly couple go to heaven together. They both arrive at the pearly gates together and meet St. Peter, who says, "Let me show you around." He pointed to a mansion and said, "That will be your house located next to the country club." The old man asked, and how much will it cost? St. Peter said, "Oh, there's no charge. It's free. You're in heaven." The country club has no fees or costs either. The old man is really happy by now and asks about the food. St. Peter says, "Although you don't need to eat, we do have full buffets, the very best pork, beef, poultry." The old man asks, "Are those bad for your health?" He says, "Yeah, but you're in heaven now. There's no need to worry about your health." The old man turns to his wife and snarls at her. She said, "What was that for?" He says, "If it wasn't for you and your bran muffins, we could have been here 30 years ago." So we make sacrifices to avoid paradise, eh? We're not convinced. Well, let's see how we got there. Now, this isn't a talk about theology. It's a cultural tour of how humans across time and continents have imagined the afterlife. And it says more about us than it does about eternity. So have we always imagined an afterlife? Well, we started about 4,000 years ago when civilization, took off. So 4,000 years ago, I was in Mesopotamia. They looked to the sky and they saw the stars, and they imagined that was where the gods lived. But the mortals never went there. After the mortals died, they stayed on earth. They stayed in the ground, and they were just, condemned to live in the earth, in this shadowy world, just eating clay for the rest of existence. So they never ascended to the gods. The Chinese had a similar idea. But your survival in the underworld was based on how much you were remembered. So if your relatives and friends remembered you, you lived longer. I'm not sure that was a bonus, but anyway, that became part of their tradition, remembering their ancestors. And there were dream worlds and the reincarnations, but there was never any judgment. It was just the next phase. You just continued your life in the next phase, which was death. But the idea that your fate after life was based on how you lived your life was really first introduced by the Egyptians. Now the Egyptians, they imagined that after death there was a journey, and they packed your tomb with, they packed your tomb like a carry-on for a long journey. They packed it with food and provisions, clothes, even furniture. It was a long journey, and the soul had to navigate through the underworld. And it was a perilous realm, and it was filled with gates and guardians on these gates, and they were judged at these various gates. Not only judged, but apparently it was very bureaucratic, so you were checked off on lists and made sure you'd done all the right stuff in your life. And there were spells from the Book of the Dead. They were inscribed on the tomb walls or on papyrus scrolls, and the guide would test you, and you had to pass all these in order to continue your journey. And if you made it that far, you entered the house of Ma'at, and your heart was weighed. Your heart was weighed against a feather, but it was no ordinary feather. This was the feather of truth and justice. And if your heart was heavier than this feather, and the feather, and if it was heavier because it was full of guilt and regret, or clogged arteries and cholesterol, I don't know. But if it was heavier, your heart was divided by a terrifying creature called Amit. And then Amit was part lion, part hippo, and part crocodile. And this was your second death. And that was it. That was the end of your soul. That was it. But if you passed, you then got to enter the field of reeds. Now, the field of reeds was Egypt. You got to return to Egypt, but it was a different Egypt. It was a lush, green version of Egypt. There was no hunger. Everything was clean. There was no dust. Everything stayed pristine. And you got to live out eternity in a wonderful version of something you recognize. It was Egypt 2.0. And the Greeks came along, and they added quite a bit of alcohol to the process. Because their idea was, they had Hades. Now Hades was a strange place. It wasn't like a hell where you were punished. Hades was a joyless twilight zone where all the souls drifted in shadows. It was just boring and joy. Anything that made life worth living, they just took it out. And that was Hades. And even Achilles got bored there. He said, and I quote, I got the source if anyone's interested, "I'd rather be a slave on earth than a king among the dead." So death wasn't peace or reward, but a tragic loss of everything that made life worth living. Unless the gods loved you, or you were a brave warrior. And then you went straight to the fields of Elysium. And again, that was a lush, green, pastoral place where wine flowed and hangovers didn't exist. And you could party, and it was just wonderful. And later on, the Greeks decided that, yes, we did have an immortal soul, and that this was reborn. And that rebirth was based on how you behaved in your life. And when you attained a truly virtuous life, you could escape the rebirth cycle and attain godlike status. And it was about this time, further to the east, that the Buddhists were coming to the same conclusion. They saw the afterlife and death as a cycle. They saw it as a spiritual rebirth, and every time that you lived your life in a more virtual and more enlightened form, that you could be rebirthed in a more enlightened manner until you were purely enlightened and you could break the cycle and you could enter a godlike status. And it was moksha and nirvana. You could enter those places. And it wasn't a place, but it was a release. It was a release from the cycle. A release like cancelling your cable plan, I guess. It was just a sense of freedom. And they believed that heaven wasn't up there, it's right here. And they rejected that separate place. Now in Mesoamerica, again, they had the idea of cosmic journeys and jaguar gods. And they had layered heavens and underworlds. And you traverse these various layers, again, facing challenges. And they believed that as you pass through these layers, it was a transformation. And they had the saying, "Para los pueblos indígenas, la muerte no era el fin, era transformación." For the indigenous peoples, death wasn't the end, it was just a transformation. Now, 3,000 years ago, then we get more heavily into the moral aspect of the afterlife. A Persian prophet called Zarathustra, even more loyal, gave us the foundation of how we view heaven today. He saw the universe as a cosmic battle between good and evil, and every human thought and deed tipped the scale one way or the other. Now, choices made during your life would determine the width of a bridge that you would have to cross after death. So, for the righteous, the bridge got wider until you reached a place of brilliant light, sweet scent, and celestial music. And you were guided there by a spirit who was your own personal guide, your own personal spirit. But for those who made bad choices during your life, the bridge narrowed until it became razor thin, and the poor souls fell into the house of lies, a pit of smoke, stench, and torment. And if you weren't totally good or totally bad, you were held in limbo till the end of days when all souls would be renewed. Now, the early Hebrew belief had death as sleep. Basically, you just fell asleep. And kings and beggars shared the same place. They slept side by side. Morality had nothing to do with it. But everything changed when the Jewish people came under Persian rule in the 6th century. Remember, Zarathustra gave us this idea that there was this moral aspect to the afterlife. So, and that the Jewish people had suffered quite harshly under Persian rule and under other ruling classes as well, and they quite liked the idea of this fact that if you suffer in one life, you get reward in the next. So judgment, reward, salvation, redemption, resurrection, these now started to become woven into the afterlife story. And Christianity and Islam built on this. So heaven became an incentive. Behave now, recline later. So, it was also an inversion of power. The good, the humble, the meek, the faithful, the pure, the peaceful, they're the ones that get to be with God in heaven. Now, this was not a popular idea with the kings and the popes and the priests, because they all thought they had sort of, a direct line to God and to the upper echelons of heaven. But, and some have argued that this was why it remained a sort of vague concept about what heaven was like. They didn't quite like this inversion of power. But heaven really has always been a mirror which has reflected our cultural values. And in the past, the warriors get Valhalla, the scholars get libraries, lovers get reunions, families get an eternal Thanksgiving get-together. Anyone get a shudder running through them there? And in the medieval times, heaven got a bit of a makeover. We got pearly gates, we got choirs, we got harps, And we got the idea of with pearly gates, you've got to imagine a nice wall around it, build that wall. And we got St. Peter as the immigration officer checking you out on the... we got... I don't know why, but, the heaven was always up there, right? It was always an ascent, and there was always these stairs to climb. Now, as we got older, those stairs became less and less appealing, right? It's like, really? Would an escalator hurt, Can't we just... But anyway, and we get to the top there, and we'd look at those gates, and they always reflected the sensibility of the time. So, during the Baroque period, they became very ornate. In Victorian times, it became sort of a well-behaved tea party up there. We do have modern interpretations of heaven in popular culture. Did anyone see the sitcom, The Good Place?
Yeah.
One of the rare sitcoms, an American sitcom, that talked about and portrayed heaven. It was about someone was sent to heaven incorrectly. And the mayhem and that ensued afterwards. But it was interesting because in the final episode, they had a profound exploration of death's role in creating meaning in life. So there was a group called the Soul Squad, I guess. It was a sort of policed the heaven. And they discovered that the heaven, the good place in paradise, had left the residents bored and empty, which I think reflected our modern obsession with novelty and always wanting to be entertained. And so the residents are a little restless in heaven, so they devised a solution, a door that allowed souls to peacefully end their existence when they felt complete. So they could either choose the door to continue in heaven, or they could end their existence. And the concept tackled head-on the question of whether immortality would actually be desirable. So the decision sparked a philosophical debate, even among the show's advisors. And they had a couple of consultants that were arguing between themselves about this last episode. And one of the consultants said, well, the fact that we die is what makes what we do and who we do it to matter. It's the finality of life that makes life so important. And another advisor disagreed, said, well, I don't understand why you think that removing the limit of life would suddenly deprive it of meaning. So it didn't resolve the debate, but it presented multiple perspectives. You know, do you go to heaven for the climate and hell for the company? I have no idea. But, you know, it's when we have this cultural clash of ideas of heaven and the afterlife, you know, can we reconcile our life as we know it? Can we get that with what our expectations are in the afterlife? Now, we're celebrating Day of the Dead today. And I hope you all go out. Ahihik is going to have some amazing celebrations. I think it's going to be, whether you've enjoyed it here before, it's going to be amazing. Including they're going to have boats on the lake. A procession of boats on the lake. Colon is going to be decorated. And it's all, the idea behind the Day of the Dead is that the division between the inframundo, the underworld, and our world is narrowest at this time of year. And the souls can make their trek through the underworld and be closest to us, and we can be closest to them. So we build these offrendas with the favorite articles that their loved ones enjoyed during their life, be it their favorite drink, their favorite items, cigarettes, anything that they treasured during their life. It's remembrance. And it's, you know, whether you believe in the spirits coming to join us on, you know, today, it's still a moment to reflect on our loved ones. Even our pets. The altar at the back there is an altar for pets. So you can see all the dogs we've lost. This is a relatively recent addition to the Day of the Dead celebrations. So it is an indigenous practice, and the indigenous, you know, they had this underworld belief where souls could come and visit us. Now, when the Spanish Church came, they also had this idea of actually 2 days. It was All Saints Day and All Souls Day, and the church and the indigenous, the church said, well, we'll squeeze the indigenous celebrations into 2 days, and the indigenous really kept their own traditions, but it was you know, put into one day, the Day of the Dead, and there's a Spanish say, aquí celebramos la vida después de la muerte, con música, comida y flores. So here we celebrate life after death with music, food, and flower. And it really is a celebration. In the Pantheon, in the cemetery, there are strolling mariachis playing the deceased's favorite tunes. They enjoy a picnic together, usually with the deceased's favorite food. It's a wonderful time to celebrate the life of your loved ones. Have I lost my last... Oh, no, there we are. So, as I say, don't not only enjoy the sight, but enjoy the sentiment. Because this is truly a wonderful day when we can really connect with our past loved ones and enjoy their memories. It really is a wonderful day. If heaven is eternal, do we get a nap? Greg will pass out the microphone. And heaven, look upon heaven as kindness. It's a legacy. It's a connection. And maybe heaven isn't where we go. It's what we leave behind. Que encuentres tu cielo aquí en la tierra. May you find your heaven right here, in laughter, in love, and in community. Thank you.